How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 3. You can pretty much expect for the remainder of the semester that I'll be making a few of these videos each week. And the purpose of these videos will generally be just to give you a sense of what we're up to, where we've been, where we're heading, what the week's work looks like. It might also give me an opportunity to clarify any concepts or ideas that we're working with in class. And so they're just kind of a chance for me to touch base with you and give you a sense of what's going on. It also gives you a chance to put a face to a name with me and to maybe humanize the course a little bit, because I know an online course can sort of be an isolating experience where you're, wherever you are and you're just at a computer, and it's nice to know that there's somebody else on the other end. So to this point in the semester, we've primarily been working on our resumes and cover letters, and to me, I say this in every time I teach this course, if you can write a really good resume and cover letter, there are very few documents you can't write. A resume and a cover letter really touch on all of the important elements of a technical writing class. You have to write to a specific audience who has a specific set of needs. You have to include very important and relevant information and omit the stuff that's maybe less important or maybe not as relevant, which is oftentimes a really tough decision, as some of you are probably figuring out now as you're revising your resumes and cover letters. You have to write persuasively, descriptively. You have to avoid technical or insider language. So there's a lot going on, and so that's why I like to start with that assignment. Not only that, but it's a very practical assignment, and it's not uncommon for folks to use the resume and cover letter that they produce for this class to actually go out and get jobs. So, I tell people all the time that, my goal is that when you leave my class, you'll have the best resume and cover letter you've ever had, and it's something that you can, use as a living document and constantly update as you accrue more credentials and experiences and skills, etc. So, and I hope that you've learned a lot through the experience of doing this, and I hope that my feedback was helpful for you both on the resume and the cover letter. I want to applaud you folks for the quality of the feedback that you gave each other in the feedback forum. It's no mistake that I make that a central part of this course. And as I say in my little handout about providing good feedback, the reality of the situation is employers want good writers, but when they say good writers, a lot of times what they also mean are good reviewers, folks who can look at an existing document and figure out what its deficiencies are. And that's something that I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years, is that a lot of the writing that takes place in workplaces, especially trades workplaces or technical workplaces, a lot of that writing isn't from scratch. You're adapting and adopting templates. You are taking existing documents, refreshing them and updating them. In order to do that, you have to have a fairly critical eye. And so that's why peer review is so important. Not only do I think that there's tremendous value in you helping your fellow classmates improve their documents, it also gives you an opportunity to practice that reviewing skill that we know is so important. The other thing that we know through research is that as students get better at reviewing, they also get better at writing. And so I hope that that's a major developmental sort of arc of the course, that not only will you become better at writing and adapting your writing to various audiences and purposes, but also that you'll become a really adept reviewer. So again, I want to applaud you for the initial work that we did in that forum. We'll be doing that several other times throughout the semester, and it's a really valuable place for you to get feedback. Now, the reality of the situation is feedback is only as good as what you do with it. I can give you tremendous feedback, your classmates can give you tremendous feedback, a supervisor can give you tremendous feedback, but if you don't actually put that feedback into play or into action, it really isn't worth that much. So one of the things I want to raise in this video today is that in this semester, you're going to have so many opportunities to revise your work, and I want to make a really important distinction for us in this class, and that there's a difference between editing and revising. Editing are the smaller scale things, the sort of nitty-gritty things, the polishing things. They're things like grammar, spelling, minor formatting adjustments, those types of things. And those are important, don't get me wrong. Anytime we go to publish a document or make public a document, we want to have gone through a pretty rigorous editing phase. However, early in a writing process, we want to spend the lion's share of our time revising. And if you look at the word revision, it literally means to re-see. And what that should signal to you is that when we talk about revision in this class, we're talking about substantive changes. We're not talking about just going in and spelling a few more words right or getting the comma in the right places. We're talking about making major adjustments to make sure that our organization is correct, that our tone is correct, that we're including the appropriate information and content for our audience. So we're looking at the big ticket items, and it's really what we know is that novice writers or beginning writers or writers without a tremendous amount of experience tend to go towards those really easy to identify things. Things like comma splices, run-on sentences, misspelled words, minor formatting glitches and errors. And, honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that early in the writing process. The analogy that I use, that I stole from a professor that I once worked with, is that editing before you revise, or editing and not revising, is kind of the equivalent of putting new windshield wipers on a broken windshield. It doesn't make any sense. I don't care personally if all of your sentences are grammatically perfect and your formatting is spot on, if the content doesn't make sense, if the tone is not right. If the organization is wonky and all over the place, if there's no structure. So those are the things that I want you to focus on, generally speaking, in those initial feedback moments. A lot of times we're going to be talking about content, the relevance of your content. Sometimes we're going to be talking about structure and organization and how easy it is for a reader to navigate your documents. So while it's seductive to go in and just say, I fixed the spelling errors that Mike identified, or, he pointed out a run-on sentence and I fixed that and I feel good about myself, I want you to hold yourself accountable to bigger things than that. And so, sometimes that really looks like a major overhaul of a document, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a more effective document and a more efficient document, and a document that you can be proud of. And so I try not to give a tremendous amount of busy work in this class, and that's because I honor the time that it takes to really revise your work. So that's really important. So take the feedback now that I've given you and that your classmates have given you, and spend some time really revising those documents. And you'll be glad that you did, because as I just said, folks use these resumes and cover letters all the time, but they have to be very, very thoughtful and deliberate and strategic in terms of the language that they use and in terms of the information that they present. When we're not strategic and deliberate, generally speaking, that's when we end up including stuff that readers don't care about. We don't frame it in the right way. We don't explain it in a way that's relevant to their needs or expectations. So that's fundamentally going to put the resume and cover letter assignment to bed. And so what we're going to do now is so it's kind of easy to write about ourselves, right? That's content that we know very well. We know where we've been, what we can do, etc. But it's a good place to start. But now we're going to start writing about things that maybe are a little bit more technical in nature. And so we're going to start by writing about things. And your assignment that sort of concludes week number 3 is to write a review. And I'm not really under the expectation that you're going to have to write a product review at work, but I am under the expectation that decisions in workplaces get made through evaluation and through evaluative writing. And so it's important for us to practice writing to evaluate something, and that's what we're up to this week. And so part of that is that you're going to have to write in a way that anybody can understand. And so it's really easy when we start talking about tools and equipment and objects and products to get super technical. And so what we're going to practice in this assignment is trying to avoid that and trying to write about things in a way that people can understand. And one of the things I hear from employers all the time when I have the opportunity to meet with them is that folks that come out of Kennebec Valley Community College are very technically skilled. There's no doubt about it. We produce the best HVAC professionals. We produce the best electricians and allied health professionals. There's absolutely no question about that. Sometimes where it sort of falls apart is the ability to share that knowledge with other folks. And so that's part of what this is all about, is allowing you to speak directly to somebody who's a non-expert about something that you have some level of expertise about. So my hope is that in this technical review, you challenge yourself to write about a tool, a product, a piece of equipment that you have a lot of experience with, but to write about it in such a way that anybody could sort of understand what you're talking about. So for me, that would be writing about fly rods, right? I can go off the deep end and talk about the technology and the materials that are baked into a fly rod, and I can talk way over your head. I can talk about high modulus carbon, and I can talk about this and that, and what the real seat's made out of, and how the guides are set, and all this type of stuff. But frankly, if I'm talking to somebody who's just getting into fly fishing, that's going to fly way over their head. So what we want to do is we want to talk about those things because they're important, but we want to talk about them in a way that's going to be significant to our reader, and that's what your challenge is this week, is to write about a product, a tool, or a piece of equipment, but to do so in a way where you're not just focusing on specifications and physical descriptions, but talking about those in a way that's going to be relevant and significant to a reader who's trying to make a consumer decision. And so the way that we're going to sort of scaffold that or get there is we are going to practice by writing technical definitions. So it's not uncommon for us in our working lives to have to explain what something means to somebody. And so you're going to be writing some technical definitions, and the handouts that I've given you really walk you through how to do that. But the important thing to remember is, as folks who are working on associate's degrees, who are becoming experts in a particular domain of knowledge, you are now accruing a language that other folks don't have, right? Whether that's medical or technical or trades-related language. And so part of what your responsibility is, or your job is to be able to share that knowledge with other folks. And so it's really important that you spend some time really focusing on how to write good definitions. And it's really about creating distinction between similar things. And so, an example I like to use is like basal cell carcinoma, for instance, which for some people, all they would need to know is that it's a form of cancer or skin cancer, right? And that might be all your particular audience needs to know. But some audiences need to know more than that, and you might need to create distinction between basal cell carcinoma and other types of skin cancers, right? And that's where the technical definition really comes in. So you have to find those differentiating characteristics and explain to a reader, basal cell carcinoma is a type of skin cancer, and it's different from other types of skin cancer because it affects the uppermost layer of the skin, it's the most treatable, and it's the most widely diagnosed form of cancer in the world. Okay? And so now I've created lines of distinction so I know how it's different maybe from squamous cell carcinoma or melanoma. And so that's part of what your job is going to be is to think about the language that you have from your past work, your current work, or even a hobby, and to think about how can I talk about that or write about that in a way that other folks are going to be able to understand. And that's really what this technical review assignment's all about. Sure, I want you to be able to think about how to evaluate things, and that that's based on choosing a good set of criteria. So when we look at a fly rod, what are the things that matter? Or when we look at a trash compactor or a dishwasher or an excavator or a blood pressure cuff, what are the things that we're looking for? How are they measured? How are they assessed? And what evidence do you have to base your assessments on? So that's part of it, obviously, and I want you to practice evaluating because in the workplace you'll have to evaluate vendors or locations, real estate, people. So there's a lot of evaluating that happens as we make business decisions or work-related decisions. But I also, the other method to my madness here is that you're going to have to overcome some technical language because generally speaking, when we start to write about things, we start talking about materials and mechanisms and functionalities and features, and that can really be a slippery slope depending on who your audience is. Now, obviously in the workplace, there will be times when you have to write to fellow technicians or experts. And that's generally not that hard. What is much harder is as an electrical professional, when you are consulting with somebody about the pros and cons of photovoltaic energy systems. Okay, there's probably a lot of information there that could alienate a reader or an audience member or a consumer. So we have to be really adept at hitting pause, saying, who's my audience? What do they need to know? What do they care about? And how can I articulate that to them? So that's really what we're up to this week. And I want you to think really carefully as you write your review, not only about how you're assessing the product, but also about how you're using language to do so. And ideally, as technical writers, one of the things that we should sort of pride ourselves on or hold ourselves accountable to is that generally speaking, we want to satisfy multiple audiences with one communication. In other words, we don't want to have to write a review for experts and novices. We want to be able to write a review that kind of covers all of them. And I think that you'll see that to some degree, the sample review that you're going to read about Beats by Dr. Dre kind of does that, and it does it to a large degree. I think there are places where the person maybe gets a little bit too technical without contextualization or without bringing it back to significance. But that's all part of the learning process. That also has a lot to do with the publication where that particular review is published, which tends to attract folks who are on the techie side of things. So anyway, that's what we're up to this week. I hope this video sort of helps give you a sense of what we're doing, where we're heading. Just so you know, after we finish the technical review, which will happen next week, that's when we'll sort of put the finishing touches on that. Then we're going to set our sights on yet another type of writing, which is to write a set of instructions for a procedure or a process. And so really the guiding principle that I use when I teach technical writing is that my hope is to put you in as many rhetorical situations, and by that I mean writing to different audiences for different purposes and different formats as possible so that you can practice adjusting those things and creating just the right recipe in your writing so that you're satisfying the needs of a particular audience. So that's what we're up against. As always, never hesitate to call, text, email, whatever you need. I'm happy to help. But I hope that this puts things into perspective, and I hope that you have fun writing your technical review. Thanks a lot.